The Badlands of New Mexico are known for many things. Among them are the war-torn town of Two Fort, the tragic accident that claimed the life of America's first monkey naut, Poopy Joe, may he always be remembered, and the Two Fort Nine, a group of mercenaries who terrorized the region throughout the third wave of the Gravel War. Each class brought something unique to the team. One in particular proved essential in capturing control points, pushing the cart to victory, and taunting not only the opposition, but his own teammates. What trait made this class so great? Who took on the role of scout before we met Jeremy in Team Fortress 2? And what connection did he have to the spy? In this video, we explore the lore and story behind the scout in Team Fortress. We begin our tale all the way back in 1850. The Mann brothers, Plutarch and Redmond, had just lost their father, Zephaniah, to a long list of diseases, and he had left them a parcel of land to fight over. He hoped one would kill the other and become the next great man. Their stubborn nature, however, led the twins not to settle the conflict themselves, but to hire groups of mercenaries to claim the land for them. Through their companies of Builders League United and Reliable Excavation Demolition, and also under the umbrella of the mysterious TF Industries, mercenaries were hired to fight for the land. Each one was selected to fit a class that worked well with the rest of their team. Together, they were the perfect collection of offense, defense, and support, and each left misery and devastation in their wake. From Two Fort to Crossover to The Well, these 9 mercenaries became infamous. Davy Crockett as the first sniper, Fu Manchu as a spy, Sigmund Freud as a medic, John Henry as a heavy, Nikolai Tesla as an engineer, Abraham Lincoln as a pyro, Stonewall Jackson as a soldier, Alfred Noble as a demoman, and finally, most importantly in this story, Billy the Kid as the first scout. The issue for the brothers was that these mercenaries on each side matched each other with equal force, and as a result, a stalemate began, one that would last for decades. As the years passed, the Mann brothers grew older, and so did their mercenaries, but as the 1890s arrived, Plutarch hired a local engineer, Radigan Conager, to construct a device that would keep him alive longer than his brother. If he could outlive him, he could win this petty squabble. Unknown to him, the administrator of TF Industries also asked the engineer to create one for Redmond. So the war continued. By 1930, the Gravel War had dragged on for 80 years, a stalemate from the very beginning. The Mann brothers each had their immortality devices, but their mercenaries did not, so they needed new mercenaries to fight for them. With this request, TF Industries sought out a new group. The administrator and her shadowy organization had already established Team Ajax, Team Citadel, and Team Echelon. There was also a Team B and a Team D, but those names are currently unknown. For this team, the administrator wanted a group of the biggest morons she could find, and so Team Fortress was established to fight in the second wave of the Gravel War. As members of Team Fortress, 9 more warriors were selected. Virgil took over as the sniper, a secret identity as the spy, an unknown medic, a heavy weapons guy who kept everything about himself secret, Fred Conager as the engineer, Beatrice as the pyro, Ross as the soldier, Greg as the demoman, and another Greg as the scout. From a Dust Bowl to a desert canyon in the Badlands to Crossover, these warriors destroyed the environment and themselves in a war that the administrator planned to keep going forever. Greg the Scout took his role seriously. The Scout was the fastest on the team. He also had the weakest health, but his opponents had to catch him first. He was handy with a crowbar when up close, relied on a single-barrel shotgun at medium range, and his nail gun proved invaluable for picking off foes at a distance. True to his class, Greg scouted the region and alerted his team to the status of important objectives throughout the war. If they had to capture the flag, his special ability allowed him to discover the status of each team's flag, something he was able to easily secure and escape with thanks to his speed. If he were fighting on the Rock, he could easily find out the status of each team's gas chamber keys. If he were up against something stronger like a pyro or a heavy, a class that could easily take him out, he made use of 2 special grenades, a caltrop that limited the movement of his enemies, and a concussion grenade that disorientated them. Greg was confident and worked well with his team. He was also essential in completing objectives, securing flags, and updating them on the status of the battlefield. Over time, he also developed a close friendship with the soldier, Ross. From afar, the Mann brothers watched as their mercenaries once again matched each other and another stalemate began. It appeared this war would never end. Unknown to them, this was by design. Outside of the Gravel War, on the south side of Boston around 1945, another spy met a woman and they connected. But when she got pregnant, he ran. When Jeremy Willis was born and grew up, he had to fight for everything he had. He was the youngest of 8 boys and learned that the only way to solve problems was with his fists. From afar, his father kept an eye on him but never intervened. He also grew to believe that his father might be the legendary Welsh singer Tom Jones. This was likely because the spy disguised himself as Jones during his visits. As Jeremy grew older, his brothers protected him and always ended a fight before he could get a punch in. To keep up, he had to learn to be faster. He ran everywhere, all the time, until he was faster than all of his brothers. With a focus on fighting instead of his schoolwork, he struggled with literacy, but he would not need that for the work he would eventually get into. When he was old enough to get a tattoo, he got one that reminded him of who he believed his father to be. Yet, he spelled sex bomb incorrectly. Each decade once again passed into the next. The mercenaries terrorized the population of the Badlands, and the Gravel War simply continued. 1968 was a significant year in the Gravel War. For 118 years, the Badlands had been subjected to the brutal onslaught of destruction. The town of Two Fort was desperate for change and begged Builders League United and Reliable Excavation Demolition to leave. The mercenaries of Team Fortress had also grown older over 38 years of conflict, and the poor residents of this region hoped the battle would soon be over. But ever stubborn, the Mann brothers once again asked for new mercenaries to fight in a 3rd wave of this war. Until one of them got to the land, everyone else had to suffer. The years of occupation and conflict by both brothers had left the Badlands a patchwork of competing interests. Countless companies and facilities were established by each brother to stake their claim on the land, and each of these regions became the perfect battleground for the mercenaries. In the summer of '68, 9 new mercenaries were selected and became Team Fortress. Greg and the older mercenaries were reclassified as Team Fortress Classic. These new members of Team Fortress would later become known as the Two Fort 9, infamous for the atrocities they would go on to commit against the population. The roster consisted of Mr. Mundy as the sniper, a spy, Mr. Ludwig as the medic, Misha as the heavy, Del Conager as the engineer, a pyro, Sergeant Jane Doe as the soldier, Tavish as the demoman, and Jeremy Willis as their scout at 23 years old. All of that running and fighting had given him what he needed to survive in this war. Unknown to him, the spy on their team was also his father. It remains unclear whether the spy took the job to keep an eye on his son, or if it was simply a coincidence. Just like his predecessor, Jeremy took the role of scout pretty seriously. He was weak in terms of his health pool, but was confident and cocky. He was very fast, could double jump, and frustrated his targets. The sentry guns of engineers sometimes struggled to keep up with him. He ran loops around heavies and pummeled those in his path. Because of how he had grown up, the scout was overconfident and, more than anything, enjoyed hurting people, something he was able to do in this role. To perform his role as the scout of Team Fortress, Jeremy used a headpiece to alert his team of updates in the battle. When up close to a target, he battered them with his bat in a hit-and-run assault. His scattergun ripped holes at medium range, and his pistol was perfect for shooting from a distance. As his time in this war progressed, Mann, the supplier of weaponry to the Gravel War, also offered additional weapons for him to use. The Soda Popper, Force of Nature, Bonk Atomic Punch, the Winger, the Sandman, and Holy Mackerel were just some of the tools he used to terrorize and frustrate those around him. Jeremy, just like his father, also loved the attention of women, but unlike his father, he was unable to win any over. Even when he offered them tickets to the gun show, they were usually unimpressed, as there was nothing to see. There was one person, however, who he focused most of his attention on. The administrator of Team Fortress controlled everything: teams, missions, diabolical plots, and the acquisition of every pound of Australium she could find. To help her with her tasks, the administrator hired an assistant, Miss Pauling. She made sure that the actions of Team Fortress did not get them arrested, so the war could continue. Every time Miss Pauling arrived at the mercenaries' base, the young scout did everything he could to grab her attention, but she either never noticed his advances or simply ignored them. Each battle was different from the last, and the scout's role was essential in each of them. He sped across the top of the bridge of Two Fort to capture the intelligence and brought it back to his base with haste. He pushed payload carts at double the speed of other classes, and led the charge to capture control points before the opposition could reach them. And so it began, the third wave of the Gravel War, with Jeremy the Scout right in the middle of it. This war was incredibly risky. Even though the team's medic, Mr. Ludwig, was talented in his branch of medicine, the mercenaries were compensated well for their troubles. While Tavish the Demoman spent his money on a mansion, Jeremy decided to invest his instead. As soon as he started getting paid, the scout purchased as much Tom Jones memorabilia as he could and stored it in a vault in Two Forts. He believed it would be worth a fortune when the singer died. As the war entered 1969 and into 1970, the team formed a pretty strong bond, and Jeremy saw himself as the mentor of the team. He believed he could see who was doing their jobs wrong and thought about how they could improve. No matter how busy he was happy to tell them this because he was a team player. To the rest of the team, it sounded like he just liked to hear himself speak, and they put up with his arrogance. While Jeremy was great at his role as a scout, he was a little too trusting when he was told things by the rest of the team. Once Christmas, the scout was told by Jane the soldier that a bomb distributing charity was a danger to all around, and they had to deal with it. On a mission with Spy, the three of them blew up the charity, but not all was as it seemed. This place was actually a mall Santa training facility, and innocent Santas had been murdered by this mistake. But when questioned about it in court, the judge told Jeremy the truth. Straight away, he pointed out Jane, who had also become the scout's lawyer, as the person who had told him to blow up the charity. As a consequence, Jeremy, Spy, and the soldier were sentenced to community service at the Two Fort Mall. Although this should have been a simple punishment, when Old Nick, the spirit of Australian Christmas, turned up and attempted to kidnap the children to work in his factory, the three of them helped fight him off. This was just one of many instances Miss Pauling had to make go away. There was also another instance that brought Jeremy and Miss Pauling closer together. It was during a regular day that Dell and Mr. Ludwig informed the mercenaries that they may die as a result of their use of the engineer's teleporters. Dell had discovered tumors within a piece of bread he had teleported, and they believed these also grew in the human subjects that had used them. With their expiration estimated at about 3 days, the scout used this time to finally ask out Miss Pauling. To prepare for this, he asked Spy to teach him how to speak to women. Although at first he said no, the spy eventually taught his son how to seduce and dance. Miss Pauling was only allowed 1 day off a year, and this happened to land on what the mercenaries believed was their final day before their tumors grew. So, to get her attention during her holiday, Scout pressed a button that should never be pressed. It signaled that the intelligence had been stolen from their base. Even on a day off, Pauling had to check in with the mercenaries to find out where the intelligence had gone, and she was angered to find out that it had not been stolen. But before the scout could explain why he had brought her to the base, the tumor from the bread turned into a bread monster. Alongside the mercenaries, Miss Pauling fought this creature and destroyed it. As for their expiration date, the mutation only applied in bread. The mercenaries were safe. Despite her frustration with scouts, Miss Pauling actually enjoyed this battle. This was a great first date in the eyes of Jeremy, even if Miss Pauling was not aware that this was actually a date. Each day brought with it a new conflict, exciting moments, and frustration from the rest of his team. But as 1971 entered its end, everything changed. The Mann brothers were murdered by their third secret brother, Grey Man, and the Gravel War finally came to an end. The end of the Gravel War was incredibly significant in this timeline, but it was not the only war the Team Fortress mercenaries would fight in. Afterward, Saxton Hale, the CEO of Manco, needed warriors to defend his company from the assaults of Grey Man's robots. Grey wanted Manco, the family business his father had given away. In a meeting with Miss Pauling, Team Fortress was told that their jobs had ended when the brothers had died, but they had another opportunity, a chance to fight robotic counterparts of themselves to defend Manco, and also to earn a lot of money in the process. As fast as he could, Jeremy got his bat ready for combat. This new war, man versus machine, did not last for too long. Although it became another stalemate, Grey Man was smarter than his deceased brothers, and in the March of 1972, he tricked Saxton Hale out of the ownership of the company, ending the conflict completely. With another war over, Grey Man, as the head of Manco, fired Team Fortress, and each of the mercenaries were forced to begin again. But what did this mean for Jeremy? Well, his teammate and lawyer, Jane the Soldier, had lived at a raccoon sanctuary that, interestingly enough, had once been an eldritch castle of dark magic. That whole saga is a story for another day. Anyway, when the soldier lost his job and could not afford to live there anymore, Jeremy offered to help him move out. Unfortunately, the scout also broke both of his arms in the process. To those who asked what had happened to him, he told them that he had broken them in a push-up contest, 1 million in a row. With Grey Man in charge, the voice of the administrator missing, no Miss Pauling, and no war to fight in, Spy also decided to leave for a while. But Jeremy had always felt some sort of connection to him and asked if he could go with him. Always eager to keep his secret son at a distance, Spy told him no. But when the young scout mentioned that all of his savings from the war were stored in the Two-Fort Bank, and that it would kill his mother if he was unable to get them, Spy thought of his time with Miss Willis and agreed to give him a lift there. When the duo arrived in a pretty broken Two-Fort as a result of the mercenaries' conflicts, their presence was noted straight away. As they entered the bank, the police prepared to arrest them. 2 members of the Two-Fort 9 had arrived, and the authorities were not willing to let them escape. Inside, as the vault was opened, Spy saw exactly what Scout had spent his money on. His time in the Gravel War had allowed him to purchase a collection amounting to 12 cubic yards of Tom Jones memorabilia. To say he was disappointed is an understatement. Although Jeremy explained that this was a get-rich-slow scheme and that these items were an investment, Spy told him that Tom Jones was the most virile man on the planet. He had no enemies and he was virtually immortal. This was a complete waste of money. Before they could leave with any of the merchandise, the Two-Fort police executed their warrant. In response, Spy sealed himself and Scout inside the vault. For 3 days they remained inside, but when they got hungry, the duo accepted defeat. Two-Fort had captured 2 of the Two-Fort 9, and they wanted revenge. For 6 long months, Scout and Spy were incarcerated in Two-Fort Prison, awaiting their trial. The whole town wanted them to hang, but there was a system in place. The law had to be followed, or at least those set by the mayor. Meanwhile, on Grey Man's Island, the last Mann brother sought out the administrator and her stockpile of Australium, an element with incredible properties. Unable to find her or the location of the element, he hired a group of mercenaries to track her down. Team Fortress Classic. Although older, Greg the Scout was back. At the same time, the administrator had reached out to Miss Pauling with instructions to assemble the team for another mission. On the day of their trial, Jeremy and Spy were finally put before the court. The Scout was amazed that he had a real lawyer this time, much better than the lamp he had once used, or even worse, Soldier. Unknown to the Scout, Soldier and Demoman had been sent by Miss Pauling to free the 2 of them, but when Jane heard Jeremy speak negatively about him, he snapped the neck of the Scout's lawyer. This resulted in Scout, Spy, Soldier, and Demoman all being sentenced to hang before the entire town of Two-Fort. They now had 4 of the Two-Fort 9. As the event began, Miss Pauling arrived and gave the mayor and the town a lesson in civics, a lesson that freed her mercenaries so that they could complete the mission the administrator had set for them. Over the following days, Jeremy was sent to Serbia with Pyro and Soldier to recruit their Heavy. During their trip, Jeremy rejected the advances of Zana, Heavy's sister. He had come to the realization that Miss Pauling was the only woman for him. On a trip to Australia, he and Heavy discovered that the Australium that should have been hidden inside Ayers Rock had been stolen. With the help of Saxton Hale and Mags, who had also travelled there for the same reason, tracked down the culprit, Grey Man. By the time they reached Grey's Island, Scout and Heavy were surprised to find Pauling and the mercenaries were already there, but before they could catch up, an army of robots were unleashed against them. During their absence, the classic Heavy had killed Grey and taken control of the operation. With a new battle ahead, the mercenaries joined forces against the robots. Although the classic Heavy had seized control by force, the rest of the classic mercenaries remained unsure of his true intentions. In a storage room, Ross the Demoman and Greg the Scout discussed his actions. They were tired of him and thought about the time they had left. Was money really all they needed to be happy? Greg wondered if they could go back and do it all again. Would they have chosen the same path? Maybe they could just follow their dreams instead. Go to an old safe house in Newark, clean out the grenade crates and set up an orphanage. If they did this, they could have an endless supply of free kids to, well, before these 2 men could clarify what they intended to do with the children, Pyro put them down. This was the end of the classic Scout. Having fought alongside these people for years, and despite avoiding danger and running past trouble for so long, Jeremy was finally hit and began to bleed out. As he collapsed against a wall, his strength left him. When his father spotted him, he wanted to tell Jeremy who he really was, but could not bring himself to do it. So he disguised himself as Tom Jones. As the spy watched his son die, he spoke softly, recalling how he had dropped a sex bomb on Jeremy's mother and then ran from the explosion. He was proud of his son. He had always been proud. And then Jeremy saw the light and entered it. When the Scout opened his eyes, he found himself in heaven, and before him was God. God was Jeremy's biggest fan, and he had waited so long for him to arrive. He showed off the foosball tables he had prepared for his son and even asked the Scout to flex for him. It was glorious. But this happiness and awe did not last for long. God was angered when Jeremy told him that none of the women on Earth had wanted to sleep with him. Jeremy was his gift to them, and they had said no. They were ungrateful. To give the women of Earth another chance, God decided to send the Scout back to the land of the living. Before he left, God told his son that he would see him again on December the 4th, 1987. The Scout had always been a part of this conflict, but always on the outskirts. He never truly knew what was happening around him. He was not aware of what he really fought for in the Gravel War, why robots had attacked Manco, or why they had attacked him on this island. He had sped through his life, but maybe with this new chance, he could pay attention and settle somewhere. During his death, the mercenaries had cleared out the remaining robots and classic mercenaries. Afterwards, Miss Pauling pulled him onto a plane headed for the headquarters of TF Industries. Looking down from above, he saw how small the world truly was, and he realized something important. Miss Pauling would never want him, and it was not fair to keep chasing after her. He wanted a change. As the team navigated a secret passage, fearing what might await them at the end, the Scout spoke honestly to Pauling. He told her that no matter what he did, she would probably never love him. There were millions of women in the world who might. He wouldn't have to wear them down. They would just like him for who he was. And with that, he was moving on. Finally. Flo Pauling had never felt the same way about Scout, but she helped him. She told him that, statistically, a lot of those women were probably hotter than she was. It was just math. As they entered the room, Scout watched as the administrator tortured an old man who was restrained. He had no idea what was happening or why, but this was just normal for him. When she and the old man crumbled to dust in front of him, it was clear that the mission was finally over. And just like that, the mercenaries went their separate ways once again. To start fresh, Spy burned the fingerprints off of all of the mercenaries. They no longer existed. Nothing could come back to them in their new lives. With his own freedom to do what he wanted, without the fight, the Scout met many women. Each one left after having his child, leaving him with 4 children to raise on his own, 2 boys and 2 girls. To raise them well, Jeremy sued the city of Two Fort. During his conflict there, he had broken his leg about 6 times, his arm about a dozen, and he had suffered something like 30 concussions. Because of Medic's interesting view on medicine, the Scout suspected he either had too many kidneys or none at all. Over the years, he raised his children, got a house, and settled down. He had created a normal life for himself. He had stopped running. Over his life, he had gone by many names. Jeremy, the Scout, a member of the Two Fort 9, and in this stage of his life, he was simply Dad. It was in 1979 that the old crew decided to come together to celebrate Smithmas. The first to arrive was Spy, and as he met one of his granddaughters, Tanya, for the first time, he almost told her who he was. Instead, he just explained that he was an old friend of her father's from work. Tanya had broken her tiara, but Spy offered her something better: his mask. She did not need a tiara to be a princess. With this mask, she could be a princess assassin. In the minutes that followed, the rest of the gang arrived. This was planned to be one of many Smithsmases they could celebrate together, and they hoped it would not be the last. After this, Jeremy and the mercenaries' lives simply went on. Just 8 years later, in 1987, according to God, Scout was believed to have passed away on December the 4th at the age of 42. And what a life he lived. I went into this video a little differently to how I normally would. While I would usually focus on all of the background details and how everything is connected in the story, I wanted to tell it more from the perspective of Jeremy. He had no idea what he was fighting for or why. I also feel like he may have had the best story arc. He ran for so long and then eventually stopped when he realized he needed only himself to be happy, and then his kids. With how the Team Fortress comics ended, Valve have the best opportunity to explore the other teams, or where Miss Paulding went, or even the children of the mercenaries. They could enter a whole war of their own. But Valve have so many ways they could make a Team Fortress 3. I just hope they make one or come back to Team Fortress 2. Even after all of this time, there are still so many loyal fans. And they created such an iconic story. If you enjoyed this video, then I would love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments below. I would also like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Queen Arby, Lewis, Oren X, Drakey Phoenix, Daniel Cal Drawings, 501st Clumboy, Ribbon Mendoza, Imperial Embers, Canifex, Jimsy, Average Soul, Azu, Jonas, Yellow Rodriguez, Detroit, Motzi, Brina Lee, Jacqueline Lavelle, King Jack, Lifeblood, Reaper Gaming, and Mehmet. What did you think of this Scout story? What class do you play as? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.